Hello and welcome to our 14th podcast. I'm Linda, and here is Mike.
Hi, Linda. Hi, everyone. In this podcast series, we are exploring social threefolding. We are reading and discussing the original 1919 basic book by Rudolf Steiner, The Core Points of the Social Question. So, the idea is that humanity is evolving toward an ever greater need for freedom, and so, as a result, we are outgrowing our existing hierarchical society. We need a new social paradigm. And we need to take up the urgent task of social reform with goal conscious social will. Now, counterintuitively, perhaps, only by decentralizing society into three areas can we hope to overcome the divisiveness we currently experience and bring about a greater unity among people. Now, we're starting to read chapter 2 of this book, which is about the principles and theory of social threefolding. And we discussed so far how a certain limited comparison can be made to human physiology. The human physical organism comprises three independent yet coexisting systems: the nerve sense system, the rhythmic circulatory system, and the metabolic limb system. Now, even though the social organism is not a direct outcome of the physical organism, a broad comparison can be made between the nerve sense system, which is centered in the head, and the economic life. The economic life has everything to do with the production, circulation, and consumption of goods. Although this is a social activity, the goods themselves have a certain independence from the social organism. In a similar way, our nerves and senses are the most independent part of our physical organism. Yeah? So are you with me?
Yes, totally.
Now, we can also make a comparison broadly between the rhythmic circulatory system, the heart-lung system, and the rights life. The rights life is everything that has to do with our purely human-to-human relations, independently of the particulars of our economic status or socioeconomic class, and independently of our education or abilities. So, this area of pure human relations is also known as the life of public law or the political life. It is the life of the state, the government, as such. So, I want to also be clear, it's not like personal relationships, it's about human to human relationships, as we are humans. So, law, things like that. And then,
Mhm.
thirdly, a broad comparison can be made between the metabolic limb system related to our digestion and our muscles and the spiritual cultural life. And we might shorten this to just the cultural life. But it is to be understood that this is everything that has to do with the life of individual abilities, the creative abilities of the mind, of the soul, and also physical abilities, insofar as these abilities relate to others in the social organism.
Mhm.
Okay, so that was sort of where we're at, and now we'll be going on to evolve some of this and more deeply. Okay,
Yes,
it's
beautiful. Thank you, Mike.
yeah. So, is there anything else that we need to do before we get started?
I don't think so. There's
Okay,
no questions for today,
that's
so
right.
mhm, we can go on.
Okay, so why don't we switch over to the screen share then? All right, so here we are. We had been reading on the paragraphs on page 49 and 50,
Hmm.
where he speaks about one of these social members is the economic life, and we talked about that, the life of goods. The second member is the life of public law, and the third member was that about the cultural life. So
Hmm.
now we're here where it says just as it is true. We'll pick that up. That's on the middle or sort of the end of page 50.
Hmm.
And that's the, not a long paragraph there.
Yes.
So I'm just going to warm this up for us. the he's going to be talking about how the impact of modern technology and capitalism
Hmm.
have inflicted, you could say, wounds on
Hmm.
human society. And
Hmm.
it's necessary to heal these wounds by bringing human beings and human community life into a proper relation with the three members of the social organism.
Hmm. Hmm.
In recent times, the economic life has had a powerful one-sided effect on society, and the other two members, the rights life and the cultural life, have so far not been able to manifest their own unique qualities to the same degree. And so it's necessary that people, based on the feelings described last time, previously, that people get to work on implementing social threefolding. Each person, starting from the place they currently are, has a unique role to play, and everyone has a social responsibility to address the contemporary social questions in the present and immediate future, like in our times.
Hmm.
So that's what he's going to say. Would you mind reading that, please?
Not at all. Okay. Just as it is true that modern technology and modern capitalism have in fact left their stamp on our societal life in recent times, so is it necessary that the wounds these have necessarily inflicted on human society are healed by bringing the human being and human community life into a proper relation to the three members of the social organism. The economic life, simply by itself, has taken on very specific forms in recent times. Through its one-sided effectiveness, it has placed itself into human life in a particularly powerful way. The other two members of social life have so far not been able to integrate themselves into the social organism with the same ease in the right way according to their own laws. For them, it is necessary that people, based on the feelings indicated above, get to work on social threefolding, each from their own place, from the place at which they currently are. Because, in the sense of those attempts to solve the social questions that are meant here, every single person has their social responsibility in the present and in the immediate future.
Okay, thank you, Linda.
Mhm.
So basically, I think what he's saying is the economic life in our last couple of centuries has really dominated, and that's through capitalism, through technology, and the rights life and the cultural life, by comparison, have not been so dominant. And they've kind of the economic life has sort of taken over these other two in a way, swallowed them
Mhm.
up, perhaps.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so we have a necessity that each of us sort of take on the assertion of the rights life and the cultural life to bring about some kind of healthy balance
Mhm.
to the economic life.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty clear. Okay.
All right. So let's just move on. The next paragraph is a bit longer. He's going to delve into the economic life a little more, and he's saying that the economic life is based initially on the purely natural conditions and resources of the region, just as the cultural life is based initially on the innate physical and spiritual talents of the individuals of a region. So, for the economic life, these purely natural conditions are simply there
Mhm.
without human involvement, first of all, and these natural conditions shape the whole social organization. In a similar way, the purely innate talents and abilities of individuals are simply there, first of all, and these can be developed further through education and life experience.
Mhm.
So the relation between natural conditions and what develops as society parallels the relation between the innate talents of individuals and what develops through learning. So
Mhm.
to illustrate this, he says, consider how in some tropical regions, bananas are a staple food source. Whereas in other more temperate regions, wheat is a staple food source.
Mhm.
So think about how society is strongly shaped by the fact that the amount of labor required to turn wheat into consumption-ready food is
Mhm.
about 300 times as much as the labor required to turn bananas into consumption-ready food, right?
Okay.
So in any given region, society is strongly shaped by the amount of labor that must be performed just to meet basic needs for nutrition.
Mhm.
Okay, so
That
let's
is
read
such an
Steiner.
interesting
Yeah,
point.
yeah, it is interesting.
That which is the first member of the social organism, the economic life, is based initially on natural conditions, just as the single human being, with regard to what they can become for themselves through learning, through education, through life, is based on the talent of their spiritual and physical organism. These natural conditions simply imprint themselves onto the economic life and thereby onto the whole social organism. However, these natural conditions are there without being impacted by any social organization, by any socialization in its original form. The life of the social organism must be based on these natural conditions, just as a person's education must be based on the talent they have in different fields, their natural bodily and spiritual competencies. These natural conditions must be taken into account by every socialization, by every attempt to give human coexistence an economic shape, because all circulation of goods and also all human labor, as well as any spiritual life, are based upon, as a primary elementary point of origin, that which chains the human being to a certain piece of nature. We must think about the connection between the social organism and the natural conditions as we would think about the relation of an individual's person's learning to their talent. We can make this clear in extreme cases. For example, we need only think about how, in certain regions of the earth, where the banana provides an easy source of food for people, we consider what labor must be performed for human coexistence to bring the banana from its place of origin to its destination and turn it into an article for consumption. If we compare the human labor that must be performed to make the banana consumer ready for human society to the labor that must be performed to make wheat consumer ready, for instance, in our areas of Central Europe, we find the work necessary for the banana to be, at a conservative estimate, 300 times less than that for wheat.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
he's building this picture that economics varies over the face of the earth because in different
Mhm.
regions you have different natural conditions, and
Mhm.
that means different resources, different growing cycles, different growing possibilities.
Mhm.
Some things don't grow in one place or another, and in the case of maybe more tropical regions where bananas, like literally a banana tree will grow and then you basically don't have to do much to make it grow. You just plant it and then you just cut down the bananas and that's about it. Whereas
Mhm.
with wheat, there's a lot of work involved in clearing the soil. You have to till it, plant it, weed it, and then eventually you need to harvest it, separate the wheat from the chaff or whatever. You have to clean it and then mill it into flour and then bake it into bread. Like it's a huge amount of work just to have a loaf of bread. And
Yes.
and so this has a big impact on the economy and how people have to work together in these different regions to produce basic needs like food.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the amount of leisure time varies because in a tropical region there is just that much less work to do.
Right.
Nature provides so much more that it
Right.
allows for a more cultural life, maybe you could say.
Mhm.
And whereas in other parts of the world, your focus is really on the economics.
That is a very clear explanation. Um, Even like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, where we just had a sort of a side by side view of the life of a person in Central Europe and a life of a person sort of in the tropical regions. And, just being able to get a banana or maybe knock a coconut off the tree or whatever. Um, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's such a good example of how much toil and time and effort and exertion that one set of people had to do, and a system sort of built around that, and knowledge built around that to maybe even help that wheat grow better, and you know without pests and whatever, all of the technologies that were needed through time.
I'm going to add too that it was necessary, for example, in various plantations, especially in the southern United States and in the Caribbean islands, to
Mhm,
have a lot of intensive labor, and that's why there was this originally the slave market,
mhm,
because that was the needed labor. But along, once they abolished slavery, it became necessary to invent machinery.
mhm,
And the machinery, the capital development really was a result of the fact that labor wasn't as cheap and available. Uh,
mhm,
they had to pay higher rates for paid labor. And
mhm,
so this really transformed, people had to find other labor saving strategies,
mhm.
and really our whole technological development in certain parts of the world is really a result of trying to save labor. And
Very true. Yep.
yeah, and so like even AI today, we can have a discussion, but this is a labor saving concept.
Mhm,
And this would not be driven by other regions where labor wasn't really that important, that necessary.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely. That is very clear, very beautifully sort of written. It's like that is such a good contrast, and to sort of illustrate his core point, which is, like the natural status of, the wherever you're living, the resources, and then, how labor intensive things are, which needs, I mean, like look at what was detrimental to humanity, which was the slave labor. And but it's completely understandable to a certain extent that they would need to have lots more people working, and unfortunately, people with not so great consciences that were okay with having slaves, unfortunately. It
Yeah,
just,
and I
yeah,
want to be clear, slavery was nothing new. Slavery
wasn't new.
has
Yeah,
existed for thousands and thousands of years at
yes,
least.
yes,
I didn't mean to sort of poke that bear.
yeah,
What I meant to say was, uh, the slave trade was possible based
yeah,
on the need for cheap labor,
right.
and morality kind of went out the window, didn't it? And
Yeah.
not I'm not suggesting that morality is now back in the picture, because no, that's I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm
We
saying
understand that's not true. Yeah.
that the I'm talking about the development of how our society is dependent on our economic life, and the economic in turn depends on the natural resources and the nature foundation. And what is required in different regions will give a different culture,
Yes.
right? And different
Yes.
technology and things like that. So
Mhm,
so that's why we don't have a uniformity across the earth, because our
mhm.
geography is so different.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, so let's move on. He's gonna sort of reiterate this point in the next paragraph, and he's saying, so he's going to say that the comparison of the bananas to wheat is an extreme, right? But even within various wheat producing regions, and of course for other kinds of production as well, significant differences can exist in terms of labor required for the given natural conditions. So at one end of the spectrum, we have, for example, Germany, where the wheat yield is on average 7 to 8 times what is sown, whereas in Peru, the wheat yield is about 20 times what is sown. So even, the amount of labor that people must bring to the economic process is conditioned by the natural conditions of the region in which they live.
Mhm.
Okay, so if you could read
Yes,
that, please.
sure. Certainly, this is an extreme case. However, such differences regarding the amount of labor necessary in relation to the natural conditions exist also among the branches of production represented within any given social organism in Europe. Not with such a radical difference as with bananas and wheat, but there exist differences in this way, it is rooted in the economic organism, how the amount of labor that people must bring into the economic process is conditioned by their relation to the natural conditions of the economy. And we need only compare, for example, in Germany, in regions with average yields, the yield of wheat cultivation is such that the harvest yields 7 to 8 times what is sown. In Chile, yields are 12 times as much. In northern Mexico, yields are 17 times, and in Peru, yields are 20 times what is sown.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he's basically saying that what nature provides depends on the region and it has a lot to do with our economy.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And so we'll just continue reading here. He goes on to say that in a healthy social organism, the economic life consists of and only of the relation of the human being to nature and all the processes involved in transforming nature products into consumable goods. This is the economic life. Since it is so material and external, the economic system corresponds to the head system, to the nerve sense system of the human organism. Nature places limits on the economic life just as the nerve sense system places limits on individual abilities. However, just as the head system depends on the heart-lung system, so too does the economic life depend on what human labor achieves. And just as breathing is not independently regulated by the head, so must labor not be independently regulated by the economic life, and must instead be regulated by the rights life.
All right. This whole connected system, which runs its course in processes that begin with the relation of the human being to nature, which continues in everything the human being has to do to transform the nature product and make it ready for consumption. All these processes, and only these, comprise the economic member of a healthy social organism. This member appears within the social organism like the head system appears in the whole human organism, conditioning individual talents. However, such as the head system is dependent on the heart-lung system, so too is the economic system dependent on what human labor achieves. And just as the head cannot independently regulate breathing, the system of human labor should not be regulated by the forces at work within the economic life itself.
So I guess the imagination here is that the economic life is about the production, distribution, and consumption of goods. Let's say wheat or bananas or whatever it is. And you have nature is sort of taking something and handing it over, and then labor picks up that nature product and transforms it further into a consumable good. It could be as simple as cutting down the banana off the tree, or it could be a whole series of steps of labor involved
Mhm.
in producing bread, let's say.
Mhm. Mhm.
So labor is not really part of that good. It's not part of the banana or it's not part of the bread, but labor is involved in creating and bringing forth the consumable good from nature. So labor is part bringing forth, transforming the nature product into a good,
Mhm.
right? But
Mhm.
labor must not become part of the economic life itself. Labor in itself is not a good. This is
Yes.
very important. So labor works upon nature, but it is not part of the good.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a very key that you he mentions it before, I guess it's a really important piece to differentiate because right now it is, and as you have mentioned before, as Steiner has mentioned before, when labor is in the economic realm, then we are the good, or we are the goods, or so we are part. We're sold. Our efforts are sold, and it's dehumanizing.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. We'd spoken about this before,
Yeah.
at the end of chapter one, how the whole human being was bought and sold as a good,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that's called slavery, which we just touched upon. But every time any part of our labor is bought and sold on a market, then labor is drawn into the economic life. And what he's saying is labor is not fundamentally part of the economic life.
Mhm.
The economic
I'm
life is just nature
mhm.
and being transformed into a good, the good being transported and then consumed. That's
Right.
the economic life.
I'm just so kind of very curious to see how his system actually shifts that and changes that, and very, very curious. So,
Yeah, it's really fundamental to the threefold social organism idea that
mhm.
we separate society into these three different parts
Mhm.
so that economic life is just the life of goods and the rights life is only the life of human to human relations.
Mhm.
And then the cultural life is the life of human abilities.
Mhm.
And these work together all the time in various ways, but we can't mix them together. This is the problem of our society today is that we mix it all together
Mhm.
and then we treat labor like a good and we lose human dignity this way,
Mhm.
for example.
Right.
Okay, now
Cool.
we continue to talk about this, so
Mhm.
we'll go on, I think, unless you have
Yep.
something to add.
No, no. Yep.
Now I want to say this next paragraph is very curious. We'll break this long paragraph where it says a good receives its value. Do you see that
Uh-huh.
part?
Yep.
So we'll just read the first, look at the first chunk first.
Mhm.
And it's very curious how he begins this. And I'm just going to read the first couple of sentences. He says, people participate in the economic life through their interests.
Mhm.
These interests are based on human soul and spiritual needs. And I thought this is a very, very strange statement because, you'd think it was correct to say that the economic interests are based on our bodily and material needs.
Mhm.
But he's saying we participate in the economic life through our interests based on soul and spiritual needs.
Mhm.
Isn't that a little odd?
No, I mean it makes sense to me. So.
Well, this is how I make sense of it, yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Um, that on the one hand, we of course do have physical and material needs. There's no question about that.
Mhm.
But that is not the reason that we participate in the economic life of society.
Mhm.
So if we only had bodily needs, it would be possible, it might be possible for us to provide for ourselves. We could have our
Mhm.
own farm, our garden, or whatever, and we could live in a kind of self-sufficient way by providing our own needs.
Mhm.
But this is not what is meant by the economic life of society.
Mhm.
The,
Mhm.
the economic life of society involves people serving each other's needs.
Mhm.
And this is done namely through the system known as division of labor, where I work to meet the needs of others while others work to meet my needs. And
Mhm.
this is the social system of economy.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
social system of mutual service and cooperation does not arise just because we have physical needs.
Mhm.
It arises because people seek an advantage over mere self-sufficiency,
Mhm.
over just providing for themselves. So instead of having to grow my own food and churn my own butter and weave my own cloth and make my own clothes, I can specialize on one or a few tasks that I can focus on and I can perform well. And then I exchange the goods I produce for other goods that I need that other people produce. And
Mhm.
this division of labor produces huge efficiencies and brings huge advantages. And it is these advantages which are actually the soul and spiritual interests that actually form the basis for our social economy,
Mhm.
for the economic life of society.
Mhm.
So I think this provides some important background to understanding this paragraph. Our societal economic life must be structured such that each person must have their own interests satisfied,
Mhm.
while at the same time each person must be positioned to serve others in a way that brings them the greatest advantage. And this is only possible if interests can assert themselves freely and if the will exists to do what is necessary to satisfy them.
Mhm.
So the interests themselves originate outside of the economic life and they're related to the soul and natural human being. The economic life must develop institutions such as the division of labor that satisfies these interests. However, these interests of the economic life are limited to the production and exchange of goods, which is to say, items that gain their value from human needs through consumption. All right, so that's basically the first chunk of the paragraph. If you could read that now.
That's a lot in one half of
Yeah.
it. That's cool. Okay. People participate in the economic life through their interests. These are based on human soul and spiritual needs. How these interests can be met most effectively within a social organism so that the individual person can achieve satisfaction of their interests through this organism in the best possible way and can also position themselves in the economy most advantageously. This question must be resolved practically by institutions of the economic body. This can only happen if these interests can really assert themselves freely, and if the will and the possibility arise to do what is necessary to satisfy them. These interests originate outside the circle that delimits economic life. These form themselves along with the evolution of the psychological and natural human being. The task of the economic life is to ensure institutions exist that satisfy them. These institutions can have nothing to do with anything other than the production and exchange of goods, that is, wares that derive their value from human needs.
Great. Thank you, Linda. So I think he's painting the picture of the economy is very much a free space where people's interests assert themselves. I want this, I'm interested in this, and that people they see possibilities to have their needs met and to meet the needs of others.
Mhm.
So it's a space of mutual advantage.
Mhm. Hmm.
We have to think of it as a quite a free space, the economic life.
Interesting.
So he's an advocate. I would say Steiner's an advocate of the market system. The picture of the farmer's market or something. People bring their products to the market, and then other people can purchase them. And
Mhm.
he doesn't believe in any kind of coordinated, fixed or state economy or something that
Mhm.
where some kind of central body is deciding what everyone should have. This is not what he thinks.
Yeah.
It's this free assertion of interests.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Everything so far makes sense to me. I mean, he's speaking of, one day if I get up and I see that I'm just really tired of just tying my shoelace, and I somehow, because I have talents to sort of be creative, and I realize, hey, I can use this kind of Velcro type thing. Now I've got a new product. I'm going to take it to the marketplace and I'm going to see if there's any interest because, other people, it's solving a problem of maybe frustration or a problem of wasting time tying shoelaces. And let's see if the marketplace will actually take this up.
You're bringing in another dimension to this, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
bringing in this notion of the cultural, what I would call the cultural life, the life of abilities, and
Hmm.
the world of innovation and invention. This is
Hmm.
not necessarily what we're speaking of at the moment.
Okay.
At the moment, we're just talking about the economic life. We're talking about the production, distribution, and consumption of goods. We're not speaking
Right.
about the invention of new goods, okay? That's a
Okay.
slightly different topic, and that's related to the talents, the education, the life experience of the cultural
Okay.
life and how it interplays with the economic life. But
Okay.
if we just restrict our thinking, he's just talking just about the economic life. He's just
Hmm.
saying, somebody's producing bread and another person is producing vegetables and they're bringing them to a market and the producers are distributing and the consumers are exchanging and there's a market concept here and
Right.
he's saying I think is this is a free thing where people's interests are asserting themselves. I want these vegetables, I don't want that bread.
Hmm.
Everyone has the right to decide about what they want and don't want and then the producers are also asserting their, you know, interests, and everyone is just participating in this economy
Hmm.
out of interest. Yeah,
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
I think this is a simpler picture than, and
Hmm.
then of course you're not wrong. I mean, innovation, technology, new things. This is also part of this interest for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but I think he's not speaking about that right at the moment.
Right at the moment. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just highlight this because I think there is some misinformation out there that some people think Steiner believed that we should, I don't know, maybe have some kind of Politburo who decides these are what people need and this is people don't need certain things. They a central committee would decide you don't need this and so this will not be produced. I don't think this is what Steiner actually believes.
Hmm.
It's not a central body deciding what people need. It's really individuals working in a network of production and consumption,
Hmm. Hmm.
like a market system.
Hmm. So the Politburo um, sort of sense would be a very controlled sort of piece, and maybe the imagination of the Politburo would be stifling
Yeah,
the
exactly.
freedom. Is that okay?
Exactly. Yeah.
Hmm. I mean,
And this is not to say that freedom is a principle of the economic life. It's just I think the picture is simply people would serve each other in a free way.
hmm.
It's the
Hmm.
serving each other that is the principle here, but it would be done in a non-coercive way,
Hmm. Hmm.
I think is the point.
Hmm.
Steiner was a radical believer in freedom.
Yes. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the second half of this long paragraph.
Hmm.
And now he's going to talk about the definition or so of a good. He
Hmm.
says what we call an economic good is considered valuable because someone wants to consume it. Okay? Now, for this reason, a good exists in a different way than other elements of society that have value for people, such as laws and culture. These things have value for people, but they're not goods.
Hmm.
Okay? So, from an impartial perspective, there is an essential difference between, first, the human to human relations whereby one person produces goods and services for another, and secondly, the human to human relations whereby one person has a right with regard to another,
Mhm.
namely an entitlement or obligation. So, due to this essential difference, the economic life must be completely separate from the rights life. Institutions that serve the activities of production and exchange of goods within the economic life must not become the basis for rights between people. Within the economic life, one person turns to the other because one serves the interest of the other, but
Mhm.
not on the basis of rights.
Mhm.
Whereas within the rights life, within the system of politics and law, relations must not depend on one person serving the interests of the other. Instead, purely human to human relations must be based on entirely different criteria. Okay?
Mhm.
If you
Okay,
could read that second part, please.
sure. A good receives its value through the person who consumes it. Because a good acquires its value from the consumer, it exists in a completely different way within the social organism than other things that have value for people as members of this organism. We should look impartially at the economic life, which includes the production, exchange, and consumption of goods. We will not only notice the essential difference that exists between the human to human relation in which one produces goods for the other, and that which must be based on a rights relation. From this consideration, we will come to the practical requirement that in the social organism, the rights life must be kept completely separate from the economic life. The best possible impulses for the rights relations that must exist among people cannot arise from the activities people have to develop within the institutions that serve production and exchange of goods. Within economic institutions, one person turns to another because the one serves the interest of the other. The relationship one person has to another within the rights life is fundamentally different.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So he's speaking about this fundamental difference between the economic life and the rights life. And it comes down to this one sentence here. Let me find it again. Here, that there's an essential difference between the human to human relation where one person produces a good for another. So that's a certain kind of relationship between people.
Mhm.
And there's a different kind of relation based on rights. Like
Mhm.
I would say entitlements and obligations. So
Mhm.
what someone is entitled to and what they're obliged to do is a totally different thing than the economic relation. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. I'm just trying to, it's kind of like I almost need a little bit more clarity on it to really feel I get it and then I lose it type
Hmm.
of thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
he'll talk about it some more in the next paragraph,
okay.
but
Okay.
but we'll just sort of suggest maybe that, when I as a producer, as a worker, I make some kind of product, I bake bread or something, whatever I do, and I sell the bread. Someone else comes along and buys the bread because they need it, they want to consume it. That the relationship between the producer and consumer is a very different one than a legal relationship where we have, a law. I don't know what laws we can think of, but like you're not allowed to murder somebody, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
so that is a different relation than
Hmm.
the economic one.
Hmm.
Because the one where I'm producing to meet the needs of another who has needs is
Hmm.
different, entirely different than the murder or not being allowed to murder people relation.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
that's a legal thing. That's about laws.
Okay.
And it's not really about my needs. I
Hmm.
need to murder somebody, but I'm not allowed to, it's not about my needs. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I also can't purchase the right to murder someone in a healthy legal framework.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
has nothing to do with my needs or my wealth.
Hmm.
It's a human to human relation in the rights life.
Okay.
And it's a very different quality.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
for this reason, we need to separate the economic life from the rights life. They're entirely different things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I get it. I mean, in the rudimentary sense, it's so the production, consumption, all of that, it's like it's meeting the needs. That's very clear. So, and the rights is like how I treat you in relation to you. Yes?
Yeah,
No? Yeah?
the legal relation is more like generic. It's not about your particular situation. It's about humanity.
Yeah. Okay. Like human to human, as you were
Yeah.
saying. Yeah.
It's not about I have need for bread and you have need for pizza.
Right.
That's a particular personal difference.
Hmm.
But when it comes to a law, the law has nothing to do with individuals. It's
Hmm.
more generic about this is all humans
Hmm.
are
Hmm.
not allowed
Hmm.
to murder, or for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
or steal or
Okay.
whatever it is. And this is not a personal need thing.
Hmm. Okay.
And even if I want to steal or whatever, I it's not about my needs. This is not the law is not about needs.
Okay. That's clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll talk about this as we continue. That he's
Hmm.
going on. In the next paragraph, he says, now some people might believe that the rights relations between people involved in the economic life should also be taken care of through economic institutions. In other
Hmm.
words, that the rights involved in the exchange of goods and services should be handled by economic institutions.
Hmm.
But such a belief, he says, is not rooted in reality. A rights relation can only arise properly if it rests on a foundation that is completely separate from the economic life. So, in a healthy social organism, the rights life must arise separately and parallel to the economic life, which is to say, the state, the government, the actual political area
Hmm.
must be independent of the economy. If people bring their economic interests into government and legislation, then the rights and laws will just be a reflection of these economic interests. Inversely, if the state becomes involved in the economy, it loses its ability to regulate the rights of people effectively, because then the state will focus on human material needs and lose focus on its proper domain of fair rights and laws.
Okay.
Okay, so if you
Yeah.
could read that, please.
Hmm. Now, we might believe that enough would have already been done regarding this distinction necessitated by life if the rights that must exist in the relations between people involved in the economic life were also taken care of within the institutions that serve this economic life. Such a belief is not rooted in the reality of life. A person can only properly experience the rights relation that must exist between them and other human beings if they experience this relation not within the economic realm, but on a completely separate basis. Therefore, in a healthy social organism, a life must develop autonomously alongside the economic life, in which rights existing from person to person arise and are administered. The rights life is, however, that of the actual political area of the state. If people bring the interests they must serve in their economic life into the legislation and administration of the legal state, then the resulting rights will just be the expression of these economic interests. If the legal state is itself an economic player, then it loses its ability to regulate the rights life of people because its actions and institutions will have to serve human needs for goods and will thereby be directed away from impulses that are aimed at the rights life.
Okay.
Mhm,
So in this last part, it's quite important. He's saying that if the economic and it interferes with the rights life, then essentially our government will just be a reflection of the economic interests. And if the legal state gets involved in economics, then it will forget about human rights and just focus on, helping people get their needs met, and it will be directed away from its proper domain of fairness.
all right. Can you say that again and slowly? Just like really make a an example of each so that, I mean, I'm getting it because, I kind of feel like right now at this point in time, the economics life and the legal uh, rights life are intermingled and, one influences the other. Can you kind of delineate that so there's an example that we can connect to?
I don't think we have to search very hard for an example. I
Yeah,
think
for sure not. Yeah.
if you look at, for example, certain economic powers that have lobby powers over the government, they'll say,
Mhm.
for instance, maybe oil industry, or I don't know if I want to give it specific examples, but they'll say,
Yeah.
we want this, we want these policies, and
Hmm.
they will be able to put pressure on the government to enact certain policies so that the
Hmm.
government, in a certain sense, is a kind of puppet or shadow
Hmm.
of the industrial interests.
So now, what Steiner is saying, if it is separate, how will they not be able to do that?
Exactly. So the idea is the reason why this is allowed in the first place is because the government is, say, for example, beholden to a certain degree on taxes or other elements of the economic life. And so it's trying to appease those economic elements so that it get its own needs met that it needs, right? Because
Hmm.
there isn't a separation there. The government is dependent on the economic life, and it
Hmm.
is not truly separated, not truly autonomous.
Hmm.
So the politicians are kind of beholden for their fundraising, for their policies, on the money, let's say, that comes from the economic life.
Hmm.
And if we had a separate system where the funding for the government was not connected to the economy,
Hmm.
then it wouldn't be necessarily be that way. And
Hmm.
one example of this is the in Canada, for instance, we have certain restrictions on political contributions, right?
Hmm.
In the
Hmm.
United States, this is actually has been deemed illegal. So they cannot place restrictions on political donations. So in
Hmm.
Canada, there's a limit of, I think it's $1,000 per individual or per corporation that you can contribute to a political party in a year.
Hmm.
Whereas in the United States, it's not limited. So there are individuals who donate literally millions to
Hmm.
political parties. And because the political parties can use this money to leverage their political victories, they will cater to these individuals. And so the rich tend to have a lot more policy say over political parties.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so what I'm saying is because the it depends on the region, but different
Right.
systems may have different degrees of coupling between economic life and rights life.
Hmm.
Is that a good example?
Yep. Yep. And again, like it's I'm curious to sort of have an example of how by uncoupling that, I mean, it's hard to imagine because our world runs with this model right now of economic life and rights life connected to at the hip. I get the example of how it is right now, and I kind of would wonder if it may not be a simple task. and it may be something that we can sort of bring up next time or another time, but is there some sort of an example that can show how Steiner's suggestions to separate them will actually, how that will work, how he envisioned, you know, um, it's a bigger question, I'm sure, but how is that brought about without having the taxes, as you say, the lobbyists, the people who are contributing to their, it's like something that I can't imagine at this moment in time.
This is exactly the problem, Linda.
Mm,
It is like we're speaking of the unimaginable, that we don't understand it until we are able to imagine it. So
hmm
I want to make an analogy here. Let's
hmm
say we were like right now we're in the early 21st century, but let's imagine that you and I lived in the early, I don't know, 17th century, so before the French Revolution.
hmm
And we were having a discussion, and I said, hey, let's separate church and state. And
hmm
you would be, well, that's impossible because all that up until that point in history, the notion of the king, let's say, or the monarch having a divine right, the right of the king is based on their divinity, that the God speaks through the king, and that when the
hmm
king speaks a law, this is a kind of divinity speaking, and the whole idea of separating the government from the church it would just be insane. You'd be like,
hmm
how would they rule? I mean, your mind would be so confused by the
Yeah,
idea that it would be unimaginable to think,
right,
well, what kind of government would that be if God wasn't working through the king? You,
right,
but now, 100 years later, a few hundred years later, we don't even think that way. Like it's just kind of
yeah,
absurd. Why did
right.
people used to think that way? And so I feel like it's something like that. Right now we can't imagine it because we have no life experience that points us in the direction of a separation of economy and
hmm
government.
hmm
But I think in a few hundred years, people will look back on this conversation and say, I don't know why Linda couldn't see that because it's so obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of having an imaginative insight, a new
hmm
way of thinking into something that doesn't yet exist.
hmm
And there's a lot we can say about this, where our
hmm
time is up for today. But I think
Right,
this is a really key idea that he will talk about over the next many pages.
right.
So we're sort of at the beginning of this topic,
Yeah.
but really, how can we imagine a separation of state and economy?
hmm
This
I mean,
is
it's a really welcome thing for my system because I can see how incredibly ill the system is
Mhm.
and toxic the system is at this moment in time with those. I mean, it's like, yeah, 100%. I'm really looking forward to understanding and maybe having that imagination, hopefully with further reading and further your explanations, which help me understand, Mike. So, and I
Yeah,
hope
and
the
like I
viewers as
said,
well.
I think in a few hundred years in the future, people will look back on us and just shake their head and go, "Why were people doing that thing where the state and the economy were joined together? I mean,
Right.
this makes no sense. It was so
Yeah,
harmful."
right.
But I think it's just a matter of we have to find our way forward into new thinking.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, this book is trying to help us
Yeah,
think in a new way. It's challenging,
it is challenging
but very
and
interesting.
very interesting and very welcome. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. I really
So
appreciate that.
yeah, we'll leave off here. There's some things I wanted to say about social democracy, but maybe we'll start with that next time. We'll sort of pick it up at this paragraph and then work it on. Okay?
Sounds good. All right.
All right.
Thank-
So we'll see you next time.
See you next time, Mike. Take
Okay.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit like and subscribe.